What's going on, everybody? It's FreakyDude99 and welcome back to another Destiny 2 build video. This time we're in episode Heresy. It's Act 1 and tons of changes have come forth from Bungie, giving us tons of reworks to exotics, buffs to aspects and classes and supers. It's just a great time to be playing Destiny right now, as tons of things are viable for not only mid to low content, but also endgame content like Master Nightfalls, doing the expert, the Nether. Now, of course, with this episode and act, we had the launch of 3 new aspects. Specifically, the Titans got a new arc aspect that I have just been absolutely loving. I've taken Prismatic off, used the full power of arc, and I've been going into Master Nightfalls, laying them to waste, going into expert Nether, destroying it with no problem whatsoever. This build is sure to absolutely elevate your endgame status to new heights and step into any activity or piece of content and absolutely demolish it. I've been having tons of fun, and I'm sure when you try out this build, you'll be having tons of fun as well. Now, of course, with all my builds, there's going to be a picture at the end of the video for easy copying, as well as a dim link in the description if you like to copy your loadouts from there. Without further ado, let's jump into that build. Starting out with the subclass, we have the Arc Titan Striker, which we are using the super ability Fist of Havoc. Fist of Havoc is a wonderful super that actually received a buff last episode, allowing it to deal a little bit more damage as well as have its recharge rate massively increased, allowing you to get your super back much quicker in any piece of content. It also has the added benefit of blinding enemies with our Heavy Slam, allowing us to stun unstoppable champions and take them down in any piece of content that we need to, without having to pop an intrinsic fusion rifle shot or anything off to stun them first. So we can use this super to take down champions, as well as when we are using this super, our Eternal Warrior exotic armor piece is taking effect, which makes it so whenever we get takedowns with our super, it's going to be extending the duration of Fist of Havoc, allowing us to get tons more takedowns on any enemies, keep it going for a longer period of time, and melt through everything and spawn tons of orbs of power for our allies. It's just a wonderful super to use, and I know many people love using Thunder Crash, but you get your Fist of Havoc back super quickly, as well as with this build you are getting tons of benefits from Eternal Warrior for using it. Moving forward, we are going to be using Rally Barricade. Of course, since we are using the new aspect Storm's Keep, this makes it so when we stand behind it, we actually get the added benefits from Storm's Keep, and Rally Barricade makes it so we have increased weapon reload speed, stability, and range when we are standing behind it, as well as it is going to be taunting enemies in front of it, allowing us to peek behind the barricade and shoot at them as they shoot at our barricade itself. Quickly touching on the melee, we are using Thunderclap, but you can really use anything you want here. Me personally, I like using Thunderclap with this build, as whenever an enemy gets close to our barricade, we can quickly hold our melee button, send off an arc punch, maybe get an arc bolt off to do some extra damage, deal with them, and go back to ranged damage, which we are mostly doing with this build. You do have Ballistic Slam and Seismic Strike, but those require you to do a little bit more sprinting and going in the air and do a shoulder charge or do a slam into the ground. But with this build, we are staying back more, staying behind our barricade, and having something that we don't have to run up and charge first is really nice, because we can just throw off that thunderclap and go right back to shooting behind our barricade. For our grenade, I'm using Storm Grenade, which causes us to call down a focused lightning storm, and because of our aspect Touch of Thunder, this makes our Storm Grenade actually create a roaming thundercloud that tracks nearby targets and fires multiple bolts of lightning at them. This also just adds a huge benefit to having our grenade deal tons more damage, and with this build we are using Bolstering Detonation, which is going to be giving us class ability energy back whenever we are hitting things with our grenade. Storm Grenade actually lasts long enough that you can usually get 2 instances of Bolstering Detonation to activate from a single grenade, allowing you to throw out your barricade a lot quicker and just deal more damage from that storm roaming around and striking all the enemies around you. And then for our second aspect, we are using the brand new Storm's Keep. This makes it so whenever we cast our class ability, we are granting ourselves a moderate amount of bolt charge stacks to you and nearby allies. And while we were behind this barricade, us and our allies are going to be gaining increased stacks of bolt charge over time, and our weapons can actually discharge our max stacks of bolt charge, which normally we would have to use a grenade or a melee to actually get off. This added damage from arc bolt charges is huge, as it allows us to nuke down champions and bosses just by standing behind our barricade and firing off with any weapon we choose, whether it's our primary, our special, or our heavy weapon. This adds a lot of extra damage onto our already amazing build, and when you pair this with your actual storm grenade, it means you are just calling down all these lightning strikes on an enemy. I've been going into Master Nightfalls with this and been able to just crush them immediately, watching their health jump down huge amounts just from a single bolt charge going off. And then with all your other weapon damage, you just melt through them with ease. As soon as Grandmasters come out, I'm going to be using this build, and I assure you that Storm's Keep is going to be putting in work into melting down those champions for you. Now moving over to the fragments, we are starting off with Spark of Beacons. This makes it so while we are amplified, our arc special or heavy ammo weapon final blows will create a blinding explosion. Blinding of course is great for any piece of content, but endgame content especially, as it means enemies just can't fire at you, as well as it is going to be stunning unstoppable champions if they are around, which is a really nice added bonus. Amplified also increases our movement speed and our weapon handling while we have it active, and we get amplified already from just getting rapid arc weapon takedowns, whether that's through our arc bolt, through our weapons, or through our grenade or melee. We pretty much always have amplified active on us. As well as this season, Amplified got a buff, which it now has 15% damage resistance while it's active, and it actually makes it so enemies have a harder time hitting you with their shots. Next up, we are grabbing Spark of Shock, which makes it so our arc grenade bolts jolt targets. Jolting obviously adds some extra damage onto our enemies, allowing that to chain lightning to nearby targets, as well as it stuns overload champions, so if we ever need, we can throw out our grenade, call down that lightning storm, jolt them, and melt through their health with our arc bolts by standing behind our barricade. We're also using Spark of Ion, so whenever we defeat a jolted target or defeat a target with a bolt charge, we create an Ionic Trace. Ionic Traces grant us ability energy to both our grenade, melee, and class ability whenever we pick it up, as well as we are just firing off tons of jolting and bolt charges with our grenade and standing behind our barricade, allowing us to get tons of Ionic Traces, and allowing us to use our barricade as soon as our current barricade is down, having an infinite loop of there always being one barricade on the field. And finally, we are using Spark of Resistance, so while surrounded by combatants, we are more resistant to incoming damage. This is just a really nice bonus to have whenever enemies get a little too close. You get that extra damage resistance on top of Amplified's damage resistance, allowing you to tank those hits, get away, pop another barricade, and arc bolt them down into nothing. Now, that is going to do it for the subclass. Moving on to the weapons. Starting off with the weapons, for your main exotic of choice, we actually have a number of different options. Primarily, I have been using Thunderlord, as it recently just got a huge buff allowing it to synergize with bolt charges, making it so lightning strikes grant stacks of bolt charges, along with standing behind your barricade. That just causes even more damage to be going off and even greater stacking of bolt charges to hit that 10 and fire off those lightning strikes. Added to that, it also stuns overload champions, which of course in this artifact perk we have overload machine guns, but overload machine guns usually take a couple bullets to actually stun the overload champion. With Thunderlord, it is the first bullet that can stun an overload champion. This also means that you can stun a champion and swap to another weapon and just laser them down. Thunderlord is just such a fun weapon to run with this build, as you're constantly standing behind your barricade and launching off bolt charges, so the added lightning strikes just adds to that power fantasy that this build delivers on. Now forward from that, you actually have another heavy weapon which got a big buff this season, the Queenbreaker. With this season, the Queenbreaker can now swap between its scopes by holding down your reload button, allowing you to swap easily between the scopes and get tons of damage off with its new Catalyst rewind rounds. This is just such a huge buff and makes Queenbreaker go from pretty much no viability in endgame content to huge amounts of viability. With one of the scopes, you're going to be firing off a single bolt that is going to chain between enemies, and it instantly blinds the enemies that it hits, allowing you to actually stun unstoppable champions with the Queenbreaker. And then you can swap to the other scope, allowing you to fire off 3 bullets with just 1 ammo. This makes it so you can stun unstoppable champions, swap your scope, and then absolutely shred through their health bar with that triple burst. Queenbreaker has easily become one of my favorite exotics to run, as the chain lightning can shred through enemies so fast, it can stun and blind enemies on top of our already fragments, which are stunning, and it can melt through champions and bosses with ease, as well as it synergizes with this artifact perk Particle Reconstruction, which just weakens enemies, allowing you to get even more damage off. Queenbreaker is just in such a good spot right now, and I highly recommend you try it out if you haven't already, and get that catalyst maxed out for rewind rounds, allowing you to get even more damage off without having to reload. Forward from that, another exotic that you can use is Delicate Tomb. Delicate Tomb is so nice because it's also a fusion rifle, meaning it buffs from Particle Reconstruction, and it also has Unstoppable Fusion from the artifact perk, allowing it to receive that overcharge buff that also applies to Queenbreaker, which I didn't mention before. Delicate Tomb makes it so when you hip fire, you fire a shot that is horizontal, and then when you aim down sights, it goes vertical. It also makes it so you generate tons of ionic traces, as well as you jolt targets with your shots. Delicate Tomb is so nice because it increases your ability regen, and if you're going into different pieces of content, it's definitely something to try out in your slot, and swap out your heavy weapon to something like a Watchful Eye, the new ARC heavy machine gun. Other than that, for legendary weapons to use, in the primary slot I have been using Adamantite, as it is the new strand support frame auto rifle that you can roll with reciprocity, allowing you to heal your allies but also grant some healing to yourself, and some other perks like attrition orbs to just spawn orbs of power on your enemies that you are taking down, but also on the allies that you are healing. It's been a lot of fun to run, and since it's a strand weapon, it actually benefits from some of the artifact perks, allowing you to unravel targets and spawn threadlings just from using this thing. Adamantite has become a new favorite weapon of me to use, as well as if you're looking for other legendary weapons, I recommend trying out Iterative Loop from Neomuna and the Lightfall campaign. Iterative Loop can roll with Compulsive Reloader and Volt Shot, allows you to fire off a shot, reload instantly and get that Volt Shot active, and get another takedown, reload it again, and have just a constant reloading spam to get Volt Shots off and jolt all the enemies around you. It also does a high amount of damage as it is a rapid fire frame, and it rolls with the origin trait Nanotech Tracer rockets, which just add a little bit extra damage. As well as with our fragment, we are blinding enemies with our special weapons while amplified, and Iterative Loop can just shred through enemies, blinding all of them. Of course, you also have the special rocket sidearm Indebted Kindness, which also can roll with Loose Change Volt Shot, allowing you to get an increased reload speed whenever you're jolting or blinding an enemy, and then reload for that Volt Shot, allowing you to jolt enemies and trigger Loose Change whenever. Indebted Kindness also benefits from the Anti-Barrier Sidearm from the artifact perk, allowing you to stun those barrier champions just with your special weapon and still run Adamantite without having to be forced to use double primaries. A quick note, I would also highly suggest you try out Psychopomp, the new aerial denial frame from this season. It's arc, so it synergizes and it rolls with Rolling Storm, which allows you to generate bolt charges off final blows, and while amplified, which we always are, you generate more Rolling Storm bolt charges. And then of course, as I mentioned before, you do have the brand new arc heavy machine gun Watchful Eye from episode Heresy, which can also roll with Rolling Storm or Jolting Feedback, both of which are great perks to have on this thing, just some extra damage to add off. And with Overload machine guns, you can use this and then use something like an exotic special weapon like Delicate Tomb and not be losing out on your Overload machine gun. There's just a lot of combinations to your weapons and to your loadout this season, and with this build you can pretty much take advantage of any arc weapon that you want, any arc exotic that you want, and just have so much fun using them. Now that is going to do it for the weapons, moving on to the artifact. Starting out with the artifact, in the first column we're going to be picking up 3 anti-champion mods. Specifically, I like to use Unstoppable Fusion, Overload Machine Guns, and Piercing Sidearms. All of these benefit into the weapons that we are all using, but if you decide to pull out something like Cloud Strike, you can go ahead and swap one of those to Anti-Barrier Sniper Rifle, of course to grant Cloud Strike the ability to stun barrier champions, but also to receive that overcharged buff when you're in endgame content. That 25% damage buff is huge for weapons and really allows you to actually shred through champions with ease. To second column, we're going to be grabbing Overclock and Load, which makes it so while we are amplified or have a bolt charge, arc weapons gain increased handling and reload speed. Another huge buff as we're constantly using arc weapons with this season and with this build. As well as we are going to be using Unraveling Orbs, so picking up an Orb of Power or a Tangle will grant our strand weapons Unraveling Rounds, allowing us to use Adamantite and have it be a lot more effective, as Unraveling Rounds does grant it anti-barrier, and Unraveling just deals tons of extra damage on all the enemies that we take down. To third column, we're picking up Hold the Line, so while surrounded, machine guns and glaives gain increased reload speed and stability, as well as the final blows will heal you. This is really nice as when enemies get a little too close, we don't actually have knockout active, so we can't just go ahead and punch them all down. Instead, we can use this machine gun like Thunderlord or Watchful Eye and shred through them, healing all of the damage that they are dealing to us, and get back to a safe spot that we can throw our barricade down and get some range off. We're also going to be using Dielectric, which makes it so defeating arc debuff targets will grant us a bolt charge, just adding to all the bolt charges that we are generating, as well as from the boost, rapidly defeating arc debuff targets spawns an Orb of Power and heals a small portion of health. We are blinding pretty much every enemy that we take down with Thunderlord or our arc special weapon, meaning that they're constantly blinded or jolted, and we get those Orb of Powers just generating constantly, and we're healing tons from that, which makes us pretty much unkillable. And then we are also using Photonic Flare, which makes it so defeating an exhausted or severed target with arc damage releases a blinding burst. Exhaust is applied through our overload weapons, which disrupt combatants, or by weapons with the Psycho Hack or Subjugation origin traits. We are constantly overloading enemies with our machine guns, whether it's Thunderlord or our Watchful Eye, so we're just adding on even extra amounts of blinding in case we don't have amplified active, which again we always do, but it's just a huge help to have this active as well. For fourth column, we're going to be picking up Flashover, so when we gain a maximum bolt charge, we also become amplified and lightning bolts deal more damage. Remember when I said we always have amplified active on us? Well, this is why, because we throw down that barricade, we get to times 10 max bolt charge, and boom, Amplified's active without even having to take anything down. And then we are also using Horde Shuttle, so damaging unraveled targets with a weapon occasionally spawns a Threadling. This means that we can get our unraveling rounds on Adamantite, mark a bunch of enemies, even a boss with the unraveling, swap over to Thunderlord and shoot and melt through them, and spawn Threadlings just by using that little combo. It's just extra damage on top of everything. And finally, for fifth column, we're grabbing Particle Reconstruction, so dealing sustained damage with fusion rifles or linear fusion rifles will partially refill the magazine from reserves and grants them bonus damage for a short duration against that target. Just amazing on Queenbreaker, Iterative Loop, and Delicate Tomb, and any other weapon you want to use. As well as we're going to be grabbing Defibrillating Blast, so stunning a champion grants maximum stacks of bolt charge, and it triggers an arc bolt that heals you and jolts combatants that it damages. It's just amazing with all the arc bolts that we're doing, and when we're stepping into master content, we are constantly facing champions, allowing us to just heal ourselves, jolt targets, and get even more damage off. Now, if you are going into something that doesn't necessarily have champions active in them, or as many champions as you might want, like Grandmaster Nightfalls, you can swap this perk out for something like Heavy Ordnance Regeneration, which makes it so dealing sustained damage to targets with a heavy machine gun will grant damage resistance and increase grenade and melee regeneration for a short duration. This is nice if you're going into Nether Explorer or even on Expert Nether, because there's only a couple of unstoppable champions that actually show up. But if you are stepping into Grandmaster Nightfalls or Master Nightfalls, Defibrillating Blast is definitely the way to go. Now, that's going to do it for the artifact. Moving on to the armor. Starting out with the helmet, we have our main exotic armor of choice, which is Eternal Warrior. Eternal Warrior comes with the intrinsic trait Resolute. Arc Final Blows will grant us an escalating damage bonus with our arc weapons, up to ×4, which is a 25% increase to our damage, and while using Fist of Havoc, activating your super grants an overshield and Final Blows extend its duration. When it ends, we gain a damage bonus to our arc weapons, which is that ×4 25% increase. This just makes it so we don't actually have to run any surge mods on our legs, and we can instead focus on just melting through enemies, getting our damage increase from that, and use some other perks on our legs to benefit from a more rounded build. Eternal Warrior is just so much fun to actually use, as our Fist of Havoc can just melt through enemies for such a long duration, especially in something like the Nether where there's just constant waves of enemies coming at you. But even stepping into something like an Expert or Master Nightfall, where there are these different groups of enemies that are usually a little distance apart, you can go in, slam, melt them all, run over, slam them, and have that increased duration, allowing you to just bounce between all these different groups of enemies and take them all down with a single super. Now for the armor mods, we are grabbing Ashes to Assets, so we gain bonus super energy on grenade takedowns. I chose this over Dynamo as I find we actually use our grenade a lot, and with all the takedowns we get from the storm going off and the jolting of our storm grenade, it means that we benefit a lot more from Ashes to Assets than Dynamo, because Dynamo you actually need to be near targets when you're using your class ability. Ideally, we're not near targets as we're sitting back away from them, sniping them down with our machine guns or our cloud strikes or whatever we're using. We're also going to be taking Harmonic Siphon, so our rapid arc weapon Final Blows will create orbs of power. We are using Adamantite as our primary weapon, but mostly we are using Thunderlord or our Iterative Loop or whatever arc weapons, and we get enough takedowns with those that it doesn't really matter, as we have a healthy enough ammo economy that we don't need to worry about running a Strand Siphon with Adamantite or running an arc primary weapon to actually benefit mostly from those orbs of power. And then of course we are using a heavy ammo finder, which increases the drop chance of heavy ammo upon defeat of an opponent. Specifically, this applies to primary ammo weapons, which means we do use our Adamantite quite a bit, as those unraveling rounds grant that extra damage, as well as those threadlings that generate from unraveled targets. It means we can use Adamantite more effectively and actually take down enemies from the added damage from bolt charge, making it so we actually have a healthy amount of heavy ammo finder ammo dropping for us and getting in. I will suggest that if you are using heavy ammo finder, which you should be with this build, you should also run the heavy ammo finder enhancement on your Adamantite to increase the chance that heavy ammo actually drops while using Adamantite. Down to the gauntlets, we are grabbing 2 stacks of bolstering detonation, which grants us 17% class ability energy whenever we cause damage with a grenade. This itself has a 7-second cooldown, but sometimes with our Storm's Grenade and Touch of Thunder, that first instance of damage will happen, we'll gain the energy back, and then it'll last long enough for the 7 seconds to pass by, and just on that last second we can have another point of damage and gain 17% more energy back. This means that we get our barricade back up even quicker, along with all the ionic traces that we're generating. We constantly have our barricade going, and then we constantly get our grenade back from all those ionic traces. Added to that, all the damage that we're dealing with our grenade, we're going to be running firepower, so our grenade Final Blows will be generating orbs of power for us. So more orbs of power means we get our super back quicker, and we gain little bursts of health from having the recuperation mod on our legs. Now over to our chest piece, which we have our resistance mods. For most pieces of content, you're going to be running one of each resistance, whether it be Arc Solar Void, Arc Void Stasis, Arc Strand Stasis. You're going to be using one of each just to spread out all of your resistances to all the different damage types that are being dealt to you. But as soon as you step into something like expert level content, you want to double up on the resistance that matches the current threat modifier. This means that if there is an arc threat, you're going to be using double arc resistance and then a third elemental resistance to round yourself out, like a void resistance or a solar, just to make sure you're a little more rounded out from the different types of damage that are being dealt. Down to the legs, we're grabbing an arc scavenger, so arc weapons gain bonus reserves when picking up ammo for that type of weapon. This means that we can use our Thunderlord, our Watchful Eye, our Iterative Loop, our Indebted Kindness, just a lot more as we're never running out of ammo and we always have a healthy amount from all the ammos that are dropping. We are also going to be using an Innervation. This makes it so whenever we pick up an Orb of Power, we're going to be reducing our grenade cooldown by 10%, allowing us to throw off more storm grenades and trigger bolstering detonation a lot more. And then we are grabbing a Recuperation, so whenever we pick up an Orb of Power, we're also getting a burst of health back. This is just such a vital mod for pretty much any piece of endgame content, as there's always orbs of power around, and there is those times where you're on a sliver of health, there's an orb of power and you can pick it up and boom, you're back in the game and you can fight on or get away to safety. I find recuperation is a lot better than better already, as better already makes it so you regenerate immediately after picking up an orb of power, but that health regeneration can instantly be interrupted as soon as you take damage. With recuperation, you already get that health back and you can keep going even if you're taking damage from a burn or just from rapid enemy fire. And finally, for the class item, we're going to be grabbing a bomber, so whenever we use our barricade, we're giving ourselves 12% grenade energy back, allowing us to throw off more Storm's Keep and keep this loop of barricade, grenade, barricade, grenade. This just means that we want to keep a loop of constantly using our barricade and grenade whenever one of them is down, as well as we have bolstering detonation going and innervation, so we want to use our barricade and then throw a grenade. But in those times where you actually do have a little bit of setup, I would recommend throwing a grenade and then while it's flying in the middle of the air, popping your barricade to trigger bomber, get some grenade energy back, and then as soon as that grenade hits, it triggers bolstering detonation, causing grenade hits and giving you that class ability energy back. If you can time it, that's what I suggest, but in most cases, you want to use your barricade first, then throw a grenade, and then you're in your cycle. We're also going to be picking up in Powerful Attraction, so whenever we use our barricade, we're picking up nearby orbs of power. This just means that we don't have to run out from our barricade and actually chase down all these orbs we're generating, and instead we can just move up, plant our barricade, collect all those orbs for recuperation or innervation, get that grenade energy back, and keep going. This also means that if you're in a tricky spot, a good idea is to just pop a barricade, as not only does it give you that little bit of increased damage resistance while you're in the animation, but as soon as the barricade pops, you pick up a nearby orb of power and you get that healing without actually having to run to it. Add to that, we are also going to be using Reaper, so after we use our class ability, our next weapon Final Blow will spawn an orb of power. This means that if there's an enemy right up in you, you can throw down a barricade. Even if there's no orbs nearby, you can take down that enemy, it'll spawn an orb of power, and you can immediately pick it up for that recuperation. For this build and the stats you should be focusing, first off you want to go with Resilience. You want to make sure your Resilience is at 100 or tier 10, that way you're receiving the 30% damage resistance, which is vital in endgame content. Anything below that is okay, but having that at tier 10 means you're getting that 30% damage resistance, but you're also getting the lowest possible cooldown on your barricade, which is what we're looking for with Storm's Keep aspect. Secondly, you want to make sure that your discipline is maxed out as much as possible, that way you can be throwing your storm grenade as much as possible to benefit from bolstering detonation, and just keep that train going of going grenade, barricade, grenade, barricade. After that, you want a healthy balance between your strength and your recovery. Ideally, you want your recovery high enough, that way whenever you're in in-game content, you're taking damage but you have the ability to heal it back quicker. But having your melee high means that you can throw up more thunderclaps in case anything gets close. Ideally, your recovery should be around 50 to 60 with your strength around the same. And that is going to do it for the build. Now, this is just such a good build, and as much as I love using Prismatic, they really knocked it out of the park with the new aspect Storm's Keep. This just allows you to just get off so much extra damage from sitting behind your barricade. You become the true tank of the team, planting that barricade, taunting all the enemies, and just firing off your machine gun regenerating health, getting bursts of health, throwing off grenades, and causing lightning strikes everywhere. And then, before you know it, your super's up and you just go in with Fist of Havoc and just decimate everything in your way for like 20 seconds straight. This build is just such a powerhouse in any piece of content, including endgame content. As soon as Grandmaster Nightfalls drop, I'm going to be running it with this build, and I'll have videos showcasing this build in action against those Grandmaster Nightfalls, because of course that is the true pinnacle of endgame content. But even still, in Master Nightfalls and Expert Nether, this thing puts in work. It shreds through champions with all your arc bolts. It does tons of damage just with all your arc weapons, gaining those increased arc weapon surges from Eternal Warrior. And you gain your super back so quickly from all the orbs of power you are spawning through blinding enemies, through arc bolting enemies, through just shredding them with your arc weapons. It's amazing, and it's truly probably the most fun I've had on Arc Titan in a long time. Punching everything is a lot of fun, but being able to just be the Titan, be the wall, be the thing that is just sitting back and lasering everything on the battlefield as your teammates are just jumping around doing their stuff, it's a lot of fun. And then if you have teammates that are standing behind your barricade with you, all those arc bolt charges are just going off and dealing so much damage that you're just melting through bosses, you're melting through champions, and nothing can stand in your way. Now of course there's going to be a picture on screen for easy copying, as well as there's going to be a dim link and a Mobalytics link in the description below if you'd like to copy your loadouts from there. Of course, as well, if you want to see the fit I am wearing and the fashion I'm doing for this build, it's going to be on the picture as well with the shaders and the ornaments I'm using. Sometimes I see comments down below asking, oh, what shader, what helmet, what is he using with that? And I would just like to share the fashion I'm using, as I love to actually make fashion for all my different builds, and it's cool to actually share it off and see if you like what you see. Now, with that all out of the way, thank you everybody so much for watching. Episode Heresy is kicked off amazingly. We have the new acts just coming in hot. We have new content, new story, and everything is just hitting so hard, as well as we have the brand new dungeon, which was such a banger to do on contest mode. Sunder Doctrine is truly up there in one of the best dungeons in the game, with its mechanics, with everything it had. It was just so much fun, and bringing this build into it, I can tell you right now, this build will shred through that dungeon, and you will have tons of fun while doing it. So, thank you everybody so much for watching. I have been FreakyDude99, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.